Welcome back. Today we're going to do a sunk spinner. This thing, this is one of the lost elements of fly fishing. We've got soft tackles and stuff like that, but a lot of people don't realize that there is you have a spinner fall that comes back to the water and they lay their eggs and die and lay there. There's an entire process that goes on after that, which is when the spinners sink. And that's what I wrote, Cripples and Spinners. That was a big part of that, was addressing the fact that once those flies go down, they're completely vulnerable. They're laying on the surface, they hit a few waves and under they go, and there's just an enormous amount of these things out there. And so you get another hour of fishing if you do it right, and you follow those bugs down, just like you do with a hatch. You start with a nymph, emerger, you got your dun, and off they go. Well, you follow that up. Well, the same thing happens after they die. They hit the water, they go down to a certain depth. Those fish don't stop eating them. You stop seeing their noses. They're still down there eating the sunk spinner. And so this fly was designed in part with my buddy Ted Fasiglia, which I'll show you some pictures here in a second. Ted's photographs just changed a lot of what I did. The guy is just a genius. I mean, he's an unbelievable tire fisherman, but his photography is it's helped so many people, down the line. And what it did was it showed me, he had a few photographs of these bugs underwater that I would try to go see them when I was diving, and it's too low light, and you just couldn't find them. But he has photographs that he took underwater, and everything I built into that had to do with that. And the ones that I could seine up and I could see myself, I realized after I looked at Ted's photographs what I was seeing, because they virtually lose their wings. They're just like, they're there, but they're not. They don't really show up. And the way I designed this fly with the wings up and down was because of a handful of Ted's photos and a handful of the ones that I seined. They don't lay out like this anymore. It seems like they seemed like mohawked. They were just one up, one down. But when you look at these things, and I'll have Jeremy zoom in on these, but when you look at these things, they have you see the reflection of their wings, but it's only because they're on the surface. When these things go underwater, you virtually see nothing, right? Because Johnny asked me, why don't you use white wings under? And I said, well, it's because you don't really see the wing so much. You see that leading edge of their wing. It's almost a dark line, and there's very little reflective value to them down there. It's just it's almost transparent because they're underwater, right? And so I set these up and down on the fly instead of out like this, because the ones that I saw seem to be like this more than like that. And it gives a beautiful, when you see it underwater, the wings hold up, kind of wrap around the body, and the legs are out there. It's a really fun fly. This is also a great fly for you right in the middle of a hatch. I don't care if you see all these duns up, you don't see a lot of heads up, drop one of these underneath it, because all your duns do not make it to the surface. There's a lot of stuff that can go wrong between the bottom and the top there. And so they'll be half, they call them stillborns. Well, if a stillborn hits the surface and doesn't make it out, it's going to go underwater. And so consider that, especially there's two bugs in particular. The Hendricksons back east I did really well with that. And all the PMD and sulfurs were ones that I just did really, really well doing this with. I do this fly in all sizes, all colors. I mean, olives, browns, and yellows. And there's very seldom that I don't fish this, and I also nymph it, flat out nymph. Doesn't have to just be just a sunk spinner or like a swung wet fly or something like that. I go out and I fish it I'll do it on a drop shot. It's always my upper fly, and I'll fish it even when I don't really have a big emergence going on. So just a little sidebar for you. So as far as hooks go, you can use, and again, this is supposed to be a fly that's semi-suspended in the water. It's dropping down, and so I generally tie it on a dry fly hook. If you want to go to like a 1550 or a 1530, which, that's when you're starting to, because you're not really weighting these things. It's when you start using the European style of different weight hooks, you know, for their weight, for wet fly swings and stuff, and you can get your fly to sink deeper. I tend to fish it mostly on the dry fly hook. I'm going to do 1180 14 today. And again, I do this thing all the way down to 20s. I fish this thing probably as much, you know, as I do anything, especially when I'm nymphing. In the summer, I'm going to have these with me all the time. But I'm going to run this on an 1180, and it's a pretty, as you can see, it's a pretty straightforward body. It's going to have a, I have always used Hungarian Partridge on these. I also, in the old days, and I'll show a close-up of that if I remember at the end here, I used to use hen hackle. And so when I first started, I would use these just you know, regular old hen hackle. I particularly like the grizzly browns and olives and the bleached colors, those really pale yellows on the PMDs. But I'm going to use, today I'm going to use the Hungarian Partridge. I started using this, I don't know, 20 years ago or so. It's just so damn sexy. That the barring on Hungarian is just, I don't know if it makes a difference on the fly, but it just looks so good to me as a finished product because of how fine those little bars are in the legs. Kind of looks like segmented, you know, segments in their legs. And so that's going to be the tail and the hackle, or the legs. I'm going to use a biot body. The biots are, they're sexy. I did it completely after I got out west because pretty much Renee Harrop's influence on me. Renee is just this unbelievable tire. There's nothing he's ever done I don't like. But in the original, in the book, you'll see I've dubbed my bodies. I didn't do the biot. I do think the biot is probably more accurate, especially for these flies that go underwater. And so, and multitude of colors. They do this thing, every color there. I mean, they got turkey biots and everything possible. The wing's going to be Zelon. I almost always use this, or this is just the Adams Gray. I frequently, on the darker phases of them, I'll use kind of a dark amber olive brown. Again, I want that little bit of reflection, but it's got to be subdued for me. And then it's going to have a thorax that's going to be just, other than the PMD styles or the sulfurs, I use gray on virtually all of them. I don't know why. I think it probably goes back to Ted's photographs that they just seem to be a little, I could see the thorax a little bit differently. I don't know. I used the gray just because I thought it'd be a good contrast. So other than that, that's pretty straightforward. We're going to do the 1180 dry fly hook. I'm going to do it in 14. And again, just like I said, on all, you know, on all these small ones, it's really hard. We do them in the bigger size, and I do these up to 14s, but I use them. It's just easier for us to see. And I'm gonna use 6/0 Danville. I like the 6/0. When you see me tying a lot of the stuff that has hair in it or something I need to cinch down really tightly, I'm always using GSP. Pretty much exclusively on my wets and dry stuff like this. I like where I'm not really having to reef, do any type of hair work. I like the nylon for the fact that it stretches. It just gives me a little bit of control. I don't have to really reef on it. I can set it with a couple turns and it stretches and anchors in. So this is Danville 6/0 wine, which I use on most of my wet flies just because I think it's pretty. So I'm going to start this in the middle third. I'm going to break this hook into a quarter. Actually, it's going to be 2/3, 1/3. 2/3 is going to be abdomen. 1/3 is going to be the thorax. And I'm going to start this right in the middle of that, just so I've got the middle front third. And so I'm starting just kind of as a reference of where my wing's going to go. And then I'm going to come back here, and as always, we're going to stop that right at the gouge of the hook. So we're hanging down, we're right at the gouge of the hook. So on these Hungarian Partridge, you can, if you look at these, you can see that there's a lot of different styles of feathers. And so, and that's what I like about the versatility of these things. And so and there's certain colors that I just like. And I'll go in here and I dig off of these, off kind of the flanks right here. And I get the longer feathers for the tail. And then I'm going to come in here and I'm going to find, you can get away with a little bit more hackle on these than you, kind of like when I talk about my dry flies. They've got pretty long legs. And in this particular one, it's underwater. They're going to fold back for the most part. But I like the longer legs, and so I'm just going to pick one in here. And this barring in here, this is what I just love this stuff in here. The little flecks in the hackle. So, get out of my way. Now, where'd he go? So I'm going to take this longer feather, more of the flank side feather. I'm going to peel off the crap here. I'm just going to find a couple, I'm just looking for something that looks good to me. I got the nice little bars in it. That's just sexy as hell. So we're going to make sure the tails are as long as the body. You can err long here always because the tails are pretty long to start with, and there's not going to be much once it gets wet, so don't make them real stubby. Get them at least the length of the body. I'm going to do a pinch wrap right here, and you can see how long the tail is. That's a little long right there. I'm going to wrap this forward, and I'm going to give this body, I'm going to wrap this up to just accentuate the body just a little bit. And so I'm going to have a thread wrap underneath there. There's not a lot to a spinner. Once they've died and they're in the water, they're just not as bulky looking as they are when they're done. And so we're gonna end up with a pretty lean body anyway. And I'm gonna set this little thread base right here. and it also serves as an underbody for weight, not much, but it's also just for a nice smooth transition for this goose biot. I'm going to take one of these out. This is actually a pretty old, I was tying with this earlier and I realized that this may be a little bit old one because it's a little brittle. So I'm going to come in here. I'm not going to work with this tip down here. I don't want this really fine stuff anyway. If I was doing a size 16, 18, I would. I'm going to come back up on that. I tied with one of these earlier and it broke on me a little bit. So I'm going to come in here, make sure your thread's hanging. If you noticed right there, I was a little bit farther forward. I'm going to come in here, build my taper with that right there, go all the way up. Nice even wraps, just get right to, this is where our wing's going to go in. Jeremy makes me tie sideways so that camera can see this stuff, so I kind of move around here a little bit, trying to stay out of one camera and still be able to see forward. So I'm doing just nice even wraps here, just coming forward. Whoops, don't drop your hackle or your biot. So I'm coming forward. I want to keep seeing these segments. I like seeing these segments right here. Let me re-grab that. I like seeing those segments right there. And it just looks sexy. So now we've got a really thin body, which is what you're looking for. You're not looking for a really bulky body on this thing. Cover that up. Okay, now we're going to go into the, I'm not shaking enough, I need more coffee. Now we're going to go into the wing. The wing's going to be sparse. Don't use a full piece of this. It's, again, when it's wet, there's not much to it. It's just there's not a lot of wing showing there. It's pretty crumpled up. And I'm going to come in here and I'm going to do a single figure 8 around the wing right here, and we're going to keep that in the front, the middle of the front third, and just spin that. Leave it a little long here. We can trim that in a minute. Just so get it set, and you can see. And by the way, on these wing sets, I'm just doing a figure 8 here. Work back here. On this wing set, I have 2 series of these. On my lake flies, my assumption was that the lake flies would lay down and they would just barely go underwater. And so on the lake flies, I actually do this in a traditional spent style, like that. And and that doesn't really matter. If you want to set this in your traditional set, it fishes just fine. The only reason, and I swear the only reason I did this was because of Ted's photos and a handful of those, and the ones I saw that would been, they had been underwater, right? And they were up and down. But I do my, like I said, I do my lake ones, I leave them flat like this, and they fish just fine. So now I'm going to take this superfine, superfine, we're going to come in here and we're going to build a kind of a bulbous thorax right here. We're going to just, and if you want to blend this to, I use that gray, just because on the yellow ones I don't, on the PMDs and the sulfurs I don't. I use a little bit of an ambery colored, a little orangey yellow color. But on all the rest of them, I pretty much, on olive and the brown ones, I pretty much use gray on all of them. And so we need a little bit of bulb here, bulbous thorax, because it helps two things. One, it helps keep the wing up and away from the body so it doesn't just completely collapse around it. And it helps the same thing with the hackle. So I'm going to come in here, I'm going to just, and I'm establishing my third now. And so what this does, I left this stuff forward. I'm going to get a little bit of a bulbous right here behind the wing, right there, so it's a little thicker. And what that does, it keeps it from folding down around the body. We're just going to come in here, give it a little bit more. I like just air heavy on this, especially behind the wing. If you're going to, you should take these out, look at them in the water, and it's subjective. You think it should look like this, make it look like that. Just make sure you're doing it for a reason when you do this stuff. Don't guess at it. Say, well, I think it should be this or I think it should be that. Go out. You can do that, but make sure you're thinking about it when you get out there, and then look at your fly. Did it? In my first ones, I didn't have enough thorax, and when they got wet, you looked at, there was nothing. The thing looked like that. It was just flat down across the body. There was no, it didn't do anything. I mean, I could have left the whole wing up, which you probably could anyway, which would be a soft tackle. All right, so I get a little bit extra here. Get there. All right, I'm a little bit forward of where we're back there. So now I'm going to leave room for the hackle. This is all we have left. So now I'm going to take this brown Hungarian partridge, and I give this, I usually give it about 2 turns, and I'm going to tie this in the way that, in the kind of the traditional fashion that I did, was taught a long time ago, probably by Dave Ellis, I don't know. Not sure who showed me to do this, but I'm going to do this tip first, and I'm going to leave this. I'm going to get just enough so I can tie in here, and I'm going to take this. Get back there. You're going to get cut off. That'll teach you. I'm going to come in here and I'm going to catch this. I'm trying to stay out of the way of the camera. I have a little trouble trying not to lean in. You got to get these hackles stripped back so that you don't tie them in. Hold on to them. Just leave that little bit of a tie-in. A little sideways on myself here. Okay. Now, you can use your rotary. Oops, my bad. My bad. I want these wings cut before I do this. And just bring them back to the length of the body. Just like that. Just so you can... I just pull them back so that the overall length of the body, I cut them at the same time. Now I'm going to come in here and just try not to let this hackle spin. Come around, and I usually do this with my 2 fingers. I kind of hold it down because it's a pain in the hind end, actually. Trying to go around these things. I just kind of catch it with my finger on top, squish it down. Because it's such a fine little hackle. Kind of a pain in the hindy. But we got her. Give me you. Alright. Get off of there. now we're going to just take your fingers and get your wings pulled up here. Just wrap around that hackle and just build your right over top of that so you can build a small head, usually about 3 turns, if you could see it. I'm trying not to use my real glasses. Okay. Now, we should have a wing underneath there. You can see it. It's kind of built into the thing. Kind of got it covered up with the hackle. But you can see, got a little fuzz here. Okay, that was fun, but now to actually see it. There we go. So break your hackles if you got any kind of squashed in there. You can see the wings kind of intermixed into the hackle. So when this thing gets wet, it'll stay kind of bulbous like that. It won't lay completely flat against the body. These will all break loose, all your hackles will. And that'll lay back. And what it'll do is it'll give you this really, I don't know how to explain it. It's like there's water trapped and you can see through it, but yet it builds this silhouette. And you can tell that the wing's built into it, but you don't really notice it right now until I'm trying to get it so it's squished back. It'll end up being like this kind of, can you see that, Jeremy?
Yep.
Just kind of, when it's sitting out like this, and the one I tied earlier this one's a little fresher from not me squeezing it so bad. It starts out kind of high, sticking up like that, but then when it gets wet, it'll just marry around it. And I'm telling you, it doesn't matter when you fish this in the hatch. It doesn't matter if there is a hatch. It's a great fly to just go out and search with. And so it's pretty simple to tie. It's pretty fast to tie. Not the most durable with the biot. I mean, so tie yourself a few extras, but I think you're going to really enjoy the way this thing fishes, because it's a missing link, to use one of Mike Mercer's terms. It's a real missing link in our system, because not many people address the fact that the bugs actually die and their wings are developed. So I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope it helps you out.